You're
All
live.
right, cool.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining the online premiere of The Tattooed Heart. My name is Danette Liu, and I'll be moderating the Q&A for this portion of the premiere, which I'm so happy to do. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a social worker. I'm based in LA, Los Angeles, and after UCLA, I've spent the last 20 years working with services and having met and worked with amazing survivors of the kinds of trauma and abuse and family violence, which are all topics that are addressed in this film. And of course, I happen to be the sister of the director. I'm very proud to support him. And of course is Sheldon Schwartz. When the team at Mad Minds and Apartment 3G asked me to be here, I was really honored because it's a compelling and moving film. And it absolutely reminded me of some very real experiences of women, young women, whom I've dealt with as a social worker. And it's so important when I encounter films like this that have increased and created awareness for many. And so thank you so much for this invitation. And of course, not to say the least, we are joined by Danielle Martinez from the Rape Recovery Center. Hi, Danielle. And thank you for being here as a consultant for us. A little bit about Danielle is that you are an outreach coordinator for the Rape Recovery Center. And the mission of your organization is to empower those victimized by sexual violence through advocacy, crisis intervention, and therapy to educate the community about the cause, impact, and prevention of sexual violence. Welcome. Before we begin, I just want to say congratulations to the two stars of the film, Jennifer Madison and Madison Wolfe, and my brother. You should be really proud of this film. So happy for your performances. It has such a great message. It was beautifully done, impactful, with amazing performances. And I will resonate, as I mentioned already, with many, many people around the world now that it's available online. So just a quick note for everyone at home. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box. I'm sure a year later in the pandemic, we're all very familiar with the use of chat boxes wherever you are. And we're going to get right in. And y'all ready to start our conversation?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Cool. So let's get started. And I get the honors of the first question. And this is for Jennifer and for Madison. How do you both feel after watching the film?
You want to start?
Sure, I'll start. I think, I don't know, we made it such a long time ago, and now just having the feeling of everybody seeing it now, I'm just super excited and honored to be a part of something with such a great message. So yeah, mainly just excited for everyone else to see all the work that we put in and, you know, to rewatch it a couple of years later and just relive it kind of, yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel similarly. I feel like, you know, when you get into this business, you do this because you love it, but you also want to feel like you can make a difference, even if it's in a small way. And so when you get to see something come together like this, and you got to do what you loved that day, and you got to do research, and you got to learn about things you might not have known about, and try to have a different perspective and understanding, but then also hope that, you know, as the world gets to see it as well, that they get to take away that same kind of research. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And just to follow up with that thought, I'll start with you, Jennifer. Were there other things that particularly drew you to this project? And then after you respond, I'll, you know, ask Madison to add on and give her response too.
Yeah, you know, as Madison just said, we did make this a little while ago now, so I can't remember every single detail, but I know Matt Olmstead, who wrote the project, and I know his wife, Dawn Olmstead, really well. And so I was definitely intrigued because I knew his writing. Sorry, my dog Ava is growling at the mailman. Sorry. So if you hear growling, it's just Ava. But so that definitely had my attention, and I spoke with Sheldon, and he was so smart and articulate and passionate about what he wanted to make, and the whole team around him just had so much faith in his vision. And so it just, every once in a while you get these moments where you really like the material, you really like everyone involved, and your schedule allows for it, and this was one of those situations.
Sounds magical. Madison, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, besides the obvious passion behind the project and incredible writing, I think for me personally, it was just having the opportunity to portray a character with such deep emotional trauma. Like, especially as a young actress, there's not really a plethora of opportunities like that. So for me, seeing this incredible story about this young girl who had, just such deep trauma, I think as an actress and just as a teenager, it was just an opportunity that I couldn't pass up.
Hmm. No, really appreciate that. And Sheldon, what about you? Why do you think it's important to tell these types of stories?
Um, I would say I would just echo what Jennifer said. Jennifer is also a director, and I think that when you have a chance to tell a story that is character driven and related to issues that I think people should be aware of, just knowing that you might have that one chance of helping someone or giving someone hope is important to me, and that's the gist of it. Not to mention, Danette is a social worker, and I grew up with her, and we kind of had a rough upbringing. And I think that a lot of these topics are things that we've always been in some way interested in, or wanting to generate awareness of. And it was really important that I took the chance that Mad Minds gave me to echo that.
Thank you, Minds. I was like, oh, you want me to read a script? I've never done that before. Okay. And it really close to what I experienced. Danielle, hi. Yeah, as someone who works with victims of sexual violence on a daily basis, do you have thoughts to share as well about the film?
I just think it's incredible that you not normalize the act of sexual violence, but normalize the experiences, especially for survivors. I think a big part is seeing yourself. And I think this is such a big platform in film, seeing perhaps your experience, being aware that it can be triggering for some folks, of course, but also seeing and that it's okay if something like this happened to you, and then what do you do from this and what do you move on? So I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. The biggest thing that I advocate for in my work is advocacy and awareness, and this is one avenue of many. And of course this has a very big audience, but I think it's a really good start to kind of normalize these conversations because they're stigmatized.
It was such an emotional and gripping film, and I think Jennifer and Madison, you really captured the pain and the struggle and the sense of helplessness and hopelessness that, in my experience, a lot of survivors out there feel. So kudos. Jennifer, I'd like to ask you about the prep work and the research that you did for the film. Can you tell me a little bit about your process of becoming Charlotte? And you mentioned some research that you had done. So could you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because some of the research for this really crossed over from some of the research I had done to play Emma Swan on Once Upon a Time, which might sound surprising, but because she grew up in the foster system, I had done a tremendous amount of research reading memoirs of people who'd gone through the foster system. And, there are all levels of stories of what comes with that. There are wonderful stories, and there are just heartwarming stories, and there are just absolutely devastatingly tragic stories of abuse, and everything in between. So some of the sort of the darker, more traumatic side of that research was stuff that I revisited, and some of it is just so. I've been very blessed in my life. I have not been raped. I have not been abused in a way that these women have been, and so the reading and the research gave me images and the idea of just the details with which someone would experience these things, you know? And so having that to rely on was incredibly helpful. And, you know, and it's a delicate place to go, as I'm sure Madison will say as well, in terms of like, even if you haven't gone through something like that, when you start opening yourself up to trying to imagine that happening to you and imagining what your response would be to that. And then also just the heartbreak you feel for anyone who has gone through that when you start to do that work, is definitely something that is eye-opening, you know, for you when you're doing it. So there was some of that. And then also I spoke with my own therapist about what her take on some of the reactions might be to certain things, or what would be expected of someone based on where they would be in their journey of recovery, you know, from Charlotte's perspective, and the fact that it would make sense for her to want to help other people to try to heal something in herself. So it was really a combination of kind of revisiting some of those memoirs and then also getting an expert's advice based on what she had seen in her work.
You know, it's so honoring, and I think Danielle would agree, the normalization, but just the care that you just expressed, Jennifer, is so honoring to any survivor. So I appreciate that. One more question for Jennifer, and then I'm going to go to Madison. Can you tell us a little bit, Jennifer, about what was it like to do that final scene in the film?
Gosh, I wish it was sooner. I mean, I wish that
Sorry.
Because I don't want to lie about it. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't tell you exactly what I was thinking that day. And I also had no idea what Sheldon was going to choose. I mean, that's the interesting part of being an actor in a piece like this, is that part of my job wasn't just to do the research, but was to try to give Sheldon some options of what might feel right once you put the whole thing together. So, you know, I felt like the emotionality of it, I do remember feeling strongly that there were a lot of things that I could fill in the blank of I wish with for Charlotte, you know, and I think the level of her emotion kind of is based on how raw the recent information is. You know, I think if she were having that conversation before what happened with Victor, it probably wouldn't have been as emotional because she sort of tucked it away. Again, these are only my best guesses. You know what I mean? These are my best guesses based on some research. But I think when that wound has been so recently reopened, and she's like faced this person again recently, it felt honest that she would feel very seen by those girls in that moment, and incredibly vulnerable. And she would want them to feel seen and feel safe with her. So sometimes vulnerability is the best way to earn that trust.
Love that, Jennifer. And for Madison, what was your process in becoming Ava?
Yeah, I think for me, it was very similar to Jennifer, just reading stories, you know, especially on social media. They're very easily accessible, or watching documentaries, and not only about survivors, but also about women being incarcerated, because like Jen, I've never experienced rape or any type of sexual abuse, nor have I been incarcerated. So I just wanted to make sure that I was in touch emotionally with what that would actually be like, in order to, you know, portray it and give a real performance. Because I think that's really important, especially with such sensitive subject matter. Like that's always a really important thing for me, is just to make sure that I'm being as honest as possible when portraying a story. So yeah, just exactly what Jennifer said, like doing my research and just really thinking about, you know, putting myself in Ava's shoes.
Thank you so much. And that definitely came through. Sheldon, can you share some of your experiences directing Jennifer and Madison?
It was definitely a very humbling working with just that high level of professionalism and experience that Jennifer and Madison brought to the set. It was great. You know, I think that Jennifer also being a director really helped because she could also look at it from a storytelling point of view. By the way, the I wish thing came from a photo that Matt Olmstead, the writer, had seen when he was very young of some kids graffiti in a low income, high crime neighborhood in New York, and it was basically just, I wish dot dot dot, and we thought that we can't claim to know what people's experiences are like, so in sort of a meta kind of way, we would just end on a question, and I think that was your exact interpretation, which was amazing to watch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and but just overall, it was great. You know, we shot it in 2 days. There was a lot of fighting. Lynn Oding and Nikki Stanley, great stunt professionals, helped us put together the realistic acting sequence. It was tense. We didn't have a lot of time, and it was great. You know, and there was the poker scene. I remember we did that like 8 times, and we were just trying to get it to come out realistically, and that was memorable for me, and just overall, just the professionalism and being able to tell a story that has the potential to be impactful to some people was really the driving force.
Anything else you'd want to add, Sheldon, about the production process? You had an Oscar-winning cinematographer on the crew, right? Mm-hmm. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. My agent at Gersh put me in contact with Don Burgess, who was the DP of Forrest Gump, Castaway, Flight, and I really felt that as a DP, he really understands how to light in a way that is beautiful, but also intimate with character-driven pieces, and really create a world behind this person, but really not make that world too distracting, so that people can connect with the character. And I felt that I think the strongest place I felt that was with Jennifer's monologue when she delivers the truth. It was just so raw and real, and you know, Don was great to work with, and I learned a lot from him, and I hope I get to work with him again soon.
So this is just someone, again, from as an audience, I'm always curious. It's such a serious and heavy topic. Were there moments of playfulness that you guys still remember from the shoot, like between takes? And would each of you want to start sharing a little bit of what you remember? Maybe Sheldon can start us off.
I think due to the subject matter, I felt that it was better to maintain a serious, urgent tone on set. It's just such delicate subject matter that I wanted everything to feel as real as possible, even at the expense of tension within the crew. I think that paid off. I think that shooting the action, obviously there's a lot of logistics involved, and you know, different angles, and sometimes, you know, someone might trip over or you know, and you know, we laugh about it and we get over it, and we keep going, and we just try to make our day, you know, as Jennifer knows.
I was gonna say, people have this like fantasy that are not in this industry that we're all like yucking it up and having fun on set. That is, I don't care what you're shooting, a comedy, a romantic comedy, a drama, something as intense and serious as this. You are always racing against the clock. There's never enough time. It's always a long day. There's a billion logistics. When you're directing, there's 20,000 questions a second that you have to be answering with exact precision. And, you know, there is the very occasional time that there is a moment to kind of joke around or something. But in having done this since I was 10 years old, I can probably count on one hand how many times like there was like a practical joke or something on set, you know. So there is this like misconception that everybody's just like goofing around having fun on a set. Like, sets are serious. There's the companies paying for it are spending a lot of money. They're invested a lot of time, a lot of money in the story that you're going to tell. And, you know, this story in particular was a serious story. So obviously what Sheldon was saying absolutely applied to this particular set. But you know, big picture, you know, you can have conversations with a castmate or, you know, crew member in between here and there. But for the most part, everybody's just trying their best to do great work as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is a little, I guess you could say military-esque. Yeah, everyone just sort of has to function like clockwork, and when you're directing, as Jennifer knows, everything's on your shoulder. You have to make your day, and in the industry, making your day means getting everything you planned done, and the right way, without going overtime, and without spending other people's money too much. And it's really a combination of business and creativity, and just getting everyone to believe in your vision, and be professional, really.
Mm-hmm. Madison, do you agree? You would definitely add.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, like Jennifer was saying, I think even though we were doing what we love, I mean, at the end of the day, we had 48 hours to get everything shot. Not even, because I mean, we weren't shooting 24 hours a day. We had 2 work days to get everything done. And even though it was amazing and a great experience, it's very intense what we do. I mean, just me alone having the weight of trying to give my best performance is enough to kind of keep me serious and focused throughout the day. I can't imagine, trying to direct on top of that, or having to worry about making the day. So yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have to direct the two of you very much at all. I mean, the performances just were, they're really good.
Sounds like a lot of blood, sweat, and tears is really what I'm hearing.
Right, in a way that we totally
fake blood.
It just doesn't leave a lot of space for joking around. That's the only reason we're making this point. Not because we're complaining. We love what we do.
Yeah.
Seriousness to the way it's accomplished.
Yeah.
There are moments, like it's not like you can't even look at anyone, but it's just like overall, everyone was very focused and professional, which is great.
Oh, I'm sure the audience is appreciating this honesty and transparency, and the vulnerability is incredible. It's such a gift. Thank you all. So do we have time, guys, for a few questions? There's only about 4 in the chat box. Should we take a quick look? Okay. All right. There was a specific question for Jen in regards to how did you research for your role as a social worker? I think you kind of touched on that. Anything to add specifically about that particular profession of a social worker?
Not really. I mean, I think this was sort of covered earlier in the conversation. The question was probably asked before.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, that was as far as I remember. I'm sure there were things I don't remember, but as far as I remember, it was the memoirs and then talking to a therapist who had experience treating people in this situation.
That's great. Yeah. The next question, and this might be a good one for Danielle to take. What are some resources for women who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD from childhood abuse? So Danielle, do you mind answering that one for us?
Yeah, I think it varies. I think the first thing that you may know is stabilization, right? That's something that they use in therapy is for stabilizing. We call them clients. You can call them survivors, but stabilizing the client, specifically understanding what has happened to you. And that comes at a personal level, interpersonal level, first coming to terms with what trauma has occurred to you. And then from there, seeking what is the best thing that you want to do. Do you want to go to therapy? Do you want to join a group therapy? What do you think is going to be the best thing for you? So I don't think there's a right answer to that because it really depends. And we tell this to folks a lot of times when they come and they're like, why don't people report? That's a really big general one, but why don't people leave their abuser? Why do people continue in this system? And a big thing that we try to tell is everyone looks different in how they come to terms with their trauma or what they do next. Reporting may not be for them. Staying with their abuser may be the safest option for them at that moment. So how do we go about this? So I think the answer to that is finding local sources that you can. There are rape crisis centers. They're called differently in every state across the nation. They're easily accessible on Google, on your local computers, at the library. They're there, but it's first finding yourself, stabilizing with what has happened to you, and then what you want to do next.
Yeah, we've also included phone numbers to curated resources in the description of this Q&A. In case any of you want to reach out.
Yep. And those are really helpful, especially if you've never done this before. If like you're like, I have no idea who to go to, those are really helpful. They seem really basic, but they're there for a reason, because they can get you to the right places so you can seek help.
Thank you so much, Danielle. That's going to be super helpful. The next question, I'm going to tweak it a little bit to make it a little bit more relevant for our discussion. Someone in the audience wrote that a moment that really stuck out to them in the film is when the prison warden dismisses Ava. And so I think I'm going to direct this question to Madison. Do you remember that moment? You know, it's been a long time since the actual shooting of the film, but you know, what feelings and thoughts did that bring out, and how does that trigger that sense of advocacy that women need? So I'll leave it like that.
I think it's also good for Jennifer, because she was in this scene being, you know, kind of dismissed. She, you know, Charlotte, the character Jennifer is playing, you know, brings up Ava as a possible case, and he just kind of dismisses, you know, the possibility, just to kind of frame things.
Thank you, Sheldon. Yeah. So both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously a really important moment, because as an audience member, you see the fact that, you know, he kind of dismisses both of us in a way, and then in the ending, the truth comes out. So I think it just provides that message to believe people. I mean, and I think, you know, like all these movements going on in films like this, and different things kind of bring about this awareness and the fact that we need to be talking about this topic, because just by talking about it, I think people feel more open to sharing their story. And I think, you know, that's why we made this film.
Yeah, I think it definitely, it opens the door of how important communication is, and and knowing that you need to have more than one person that you can talk to about this, because you know, within the structure of the storytelling, that dismissal makes sense, because you want to give Charlotte agency in the narrative to go and do this herself. Now, that's not necessarily safe or reasonable in real life. You know, that's the way this particular narrative played out, and she believes herself to be strong enough to handle it, but look at the situation she ends up in. So, you know, I think, especially with everything we've all been through in the world changing so much in the last year, and all of the obstacles that the world has faced, and I think we're realizing how important it is with all levels of trauma to have really honest conversations with people, because what would have been better, in my opinion, is after that the warden dismisses Charlotte's concerns, that there would be somewhere else for her to turn, that she wasn't alone in that moment. And that would have been a safer movement forward. And so not as dramatic and, you know, visual from a storytelling perspective, but safer in real life. And so, you know, there's just so many things for so long that I think, especially as women, we feel like we have to tuck away or not talk about, or they're taboo, or we're not safe to share them with someone, or somehow we've twisted it around to be ashamed of ourselves instead of just talking about it. And I mean, on all sorts of levels, you know, from as traumatic as what these women have gone through, all the way to, I don't know, just really common things, you know? And so it really just shows how important community is, and it shows how important it is to turn to more than one person in a situation like this, to be able to have the support that you would need to be able to walk out the other side of this trauma.
Yeah. Danielle, do you have any thoughts to add to this question as well? Yeah.
I think dismissal is a really big part of anyone who goes through trauma, right? Dismissal of their own, oops, you fell. Dismissal in a way. I don't know if you can still hear me, but it's dismissal of everything. Sometimes I think a big thing in our society, whatever it is not even believing that something like this can happen to yourself, or other folks even believing that it happened to you. And I think that wasn't perhaps the intent of this in the scene, but it's just dismissal in general of trauma, and that can be very traumatic to the survivor. So I think, as Jennifer said, it would have been nice, right, if there was another resource, but sometimes the reality is that there isn't another resource, that you are dismissed once and then you aren't believed, and then you're kind of left to fend for yourself, right? And that's, again, just a big cultural shift that we as a society need to look at. And it's like, how do we treat individuals who have been through such traumatic experiences, and what can we do to normalize and better ourselves for them?
Thank you so much. I've got 3 more questions to go. Does that sound good to everybody? Do we have time for 3? Okay, so this is a general question for anyone who'd like to respond. How does substance abuse relate to women suffering from trauma?
I would say Danette and Danielle.
Yeah, no, substance abuse, whether it be alcohol, drugs, or whatever, can be seen as a coping mechanism, right? Coping with what has happened to you. Is it the healthiest? No. But it is a form of coping, of dealing with something, especially if you maybe haven't recognized it yourself. It's just the way that it kind of goes. And it's very unfortunate, right? Because it's something that's alcohol is much more easily accessible than therapy is, right? Especially for a lot of folks. So it's something that's very unfortunate, but I would say it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is that it's also sadly not true of many women. There isn't, you know, I definitely want to tell folks that not every person who goes through trauma ends up abusing substances. So
No.
I agree with Danielle that there is a relationship, but it's not always the case. And so we have to be sensitive to that and be monitoring our biases when we approach folks. So that's the only thing.
Yep.
Right. So the last 2 questions are actually for you, Sheldon. You ready? I'm going to go backwards. You really captured the sensitivity of each character while still creating a coldness with the light. What were the conversations like creating the light with legendary Don Burgess?
I think I touched upon this earlier, but you know, oftentimes I think, especially as the color of you know, feature film storytelling has evolved, we've sort of evolved to this teal orange contrast look, and you know, there's sort of a you know, kind of like a film 101 way of doing it, and then there's the Don Burgess way of doing it. And I think that by, you know, not just the lighting, but also the art direction, you know, for example, putting Charlotte in blue so that her face would contrast with the cool lighting in the background. A lot of these details really just, again, maintain that intimacy with the character. And the second thing is the camera. For wide establishing shots, you know, we did some slow dolly push-ins that kind of, you know, allow the audience to get a sense of the world. But whenever we were close, we let the camera go. We let it look a little handheld, not too much, but just a little bit, so that people would get a sense that, hey, we're trying to create a real world here. And I think that Don was sensitive to, you know, the world that we were creating, and sensitive to the characters, and that came out visually in a very beautiful way.
Thanks, Sheldon. All right. And then for the last question, I think that this is a unique one to what's happening in culture these days. And it definitely does not take away from the topic of child sexual abuse and trauma, and the trauma that women face. But in our country right now, there has been the topic of the spike in anti-Asian hate crimes. And so, you know, as a person actually of Asian descent, Sheldon, I know folks might look at you and not realize that, but you are. How do you feel about the current hate crime spike in America against the AAPI, or Asian American Pacific Islander community, and especially towards women and elderly?
You know, to be honest, it makes me very angry when I see what's happening. You know, as an observer from Hong Kong, who's from Los Angeles and was raised in a Chinese family. You know, I biologically I'm half Chinese, and I'm also half Jewish. Both, you know, minorities that have gone through some sort of persecution. And I think that hate crime is trauma and abuse, and the whole topic of this film is what that does to somebody, and just how you can really, you know, create some lifelong challenges for people when you hurt them. And I think that people in America need to get rid of this ignorance. And you know, I live in Hong Kong, and everyone here is Chinese or expat or mixed, and they're all working together, you know, to fight this pandemic. And it's a modern city, it's a business city. Everyone works very hard. And when I look across the border at China, it's the same thing. It's a hardworking, you know, work culture. You know, everyone's just pending. Everyone's modern. Everyone is, you know, we're all the same, you know. So please don't stop doing stuff like that. You know, like what happened in San Francisco and what's been happening. It just makes me very angry. And you know, it's the exact reason why we wanted to make this film, so that people don't suffer from trauma and abuse and have a way out.
Thanks, Sheldon. And I don't want to leave out, definitely, I think Jennifer, Madison, Danielle, if you'd like to also comment on the issue, you'd absolutely welcome it before we end today.
Like Sheldon definitely, you know, spoke for how I'm guessing we all feel.
Yeah, just you know, I just hope that the spike goes down. I hope people come to their senses. You know, even the people in the Zoom conversation, we're all human beings. You know, I really don't believe in the biological existence or justification for race. You know, I'm proof of that. I don't know what I am. Am I half Jewish? Am I half Chinese? You know, we're just humans. And at this point, just like Jennifer said earlier, you know, the global socioeconomic conditions are pretty bad. And we don't have time for ignorance and hate crime. We only have time to work together and, you know, bring ourselves through and communicate and help each other heal. That's it.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for, again, creating that awareness and that safe space for this conversation. I hope it continues. Just to wrap up our time together, I think I'm sure the audience would love to know of any exciting projects, because we're going to want to follow your work, Jennifer, Madison, and Sheldon. So could you share a little bit about what we can be looking forward to in your work and yeah, in the future?
Jennifer first.
Sure. Yeah. If anyone watches This Is Us, you probably saw me last week. So there might be a little more of that coming. And I just finished directing a couple episodes of Dr. Death, which is a new show for Peacock, which stars Josh Jackson, Alec Baldwin, Christian Slater, Kelsey Grammer, Molly Griggs, and Grace Gummer. So that was a really extended process because of the quarantine, but just an amazing experience. So that will be forthcoming soon as well.
Sounds amazing.
And I have a project coming out hopefully this summer bearing the, state of the pandemic called Polygo. So hopefully that release will be announced shortly. And lots of projects that are kind of on the back burner right now, unfortunately, due to COVID. But I'm hoping that soon we'll be able to get that ball rolling and everything will commence.
Cool. We, on our business side, we do lots of, commercial work, but for the narrative side, we're planning on releasing more short form content, similar to The Tattooed Heart. We have a series coming up. It's called Mad World, and every episode will have a topic that's relevant to what is happening right now with the global socioeconomic condition. It's a cerebral cultural series, I would say, very much in the vein of what you guys just saw. And I'm looking forward to releasing that on this channel. So please follow and subscribe, and hopefully we'll give you guys more good stories.
Well, thank you so much again, Jennifer, Madison, Sheldon, Danielle, for being here with us today, sharing your thoughts. And it's definitely such a vulnerable and honest conversation. And I'm sure the audience at home, thank you so much for joining us. And you've enjoyed this as much as myself. So keep it going. And as Sheldon mentioned, please share this film, keep the conversations going. Know that you're not alone. If you have experienced any sort of trauma and need some more help, as Danielle mentioned, I believe there are some really, really helpful links for you. And that's about it today. So thank you again to Mad Minds.